I want to thank all of you for coming. This is the first time we tried something like this, and I'm really very, very pleased with the turnout. Andrew, Jonathan, I really want to thank my sons. This was a lot their idea to do this, and I'm glad we did, and maybe we'll do it again. What did we do? We put together a list of names, and I'll tell you the truth, I had very little to do with who was invited. I got to be honest with you. We invited people that we thought would want to do this, would be interested in participating, all within a certain age range that unfortunately I long passed. But you are the men of the house, which is why the Jewish world is suffering through the issues that we're suffering these days. And you're the ones who are sitting at the head of a table when it comes to Pesach Seder. The Pesach Seder is the most practiced Jewish ritual of all the rituals. More Jews participate in the Pesach Seder than any other Jewish ritual. Christopher Hitchens, you all know who Christopher Hitchens is. Christopher Hitchens wrote this absolutely terrific book denouncing God and religion. He has a Pesach Seder. For some reason, there is an appeal about the Pesach Seder that extends way beyond anything else. And this makes the Pesach Seder the Jewish event of the year, the family event of the year. This is the one time the Jewish family is together, sharing a Jewish experience. And this night can make or break the Jewish experience for your family. And my concern is that you think of the Pesach Seder as being something for your kids. And everybody is interested, how can I make the Pesach Seder more interesting for my kids that they'll want to stay up? Now my kids are 40 and 36 and I still have the same problem. How can I make it more interesting for them to want to stay up? It's painful. It can be painful unless you prepare. To sit down at the Pesach Seder unprepared would be like sitting down at the meal and nothing was prepared. And my concern is that the Seder should be an important experience for the adults. For the children, there are enough shtick and there are enough things to keep them interested. And I want you to know that our Pesach Seder, we use every shtick possible for the sake of the children, with the frogs that we throw at each other, and the lice and the hail, and everything else we can think of to keep the kids going. Yes, the masks, the acting out the 10 plagues, we do all that. But what about the adults?
You're the one throwing the frogs.
Oh, the adults are the ones who throw the frogs. All right, I want it to be more than that. I want you to have an idea of something to say at the Pesach Seder, because you never know, there could be just one remark that could make it or break it Jewishly. So what I want to do tonight is run through the Seder. I want to run through the Seder, and it shouldn't take long, because I prepared. And these papers, which we'll use as we run through it, will remind you of a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight. And if you use one of the things, 5 of the things, it'll be adding to your Seder experience. The most important thing to start the Seder is to have the right Haggadah. Don't simply settle for Maxwell House because it's free. Although, you should know, there have been over 50 million copies of the Maxwell House Haggadah printed. Over 50 million. But, how many of these?
49 million.
Well, there were several thousand printed and about 67 sold. So We still have a few extra copies available for you. But I want you to know, there is a Haggadah for every family. There is a transliterated Haggadah, there is a Hasidic Haggadah, there is a children's Haggadah, there is a Russian Haggadah, there is a women's Haggadah, there is another children's Haggadah, there is an artistic Haggadah, there is a lesbian Haggadah, but she couldn't come tonight. There is a round Haggadah, there is the Beth Tefillah Haggadah, there is the Chinese Haggadah, there is a survivor's Haggadah. Anybody who's anything has written Haggadah. The Chafetz Chaim's Haggadah, Rabbi Hirsch's Haggadah, Steinsaltz's Haggadah, Soloveitchik's Haggadah, Riskin's Haggadah, Eli Wiesel's Haggadah, Moshe Feinstein's Haggadah, David Feinstein's Haggadah, and my all-time favorite, Wohlberg's Haggadah. Yes. And for those who find even this intolerable, there is the 30-minute Seder Haggadah, which I tell you quite honestly is not bad. But it's not good either. So, go to a Jewish bookstore, go online. There was a Haggadah that I came across this year. If I remember, I'll send it out to you. It was a very, very, the Jewish World Haggadah. It was very good, very nice little running commentary and everything. Find the Haggadah that will be good for your family, and then know the following. We start with the name of this holiday. Name of the holiday on the blue sheet, Pesach. What does the word Pesach mean? Has a lot of different meanings to it. On its simplest level, it was the name of the Paschal lamb, the sacrifice that was brought every year on Pesach. It also, according to one interpretation, means protected. Onkelos, the famous biblical commentator, calls the word means compassion. The Kabbalists say Pesach is peh, the mouth, sach, that speaks. The symbol of freedom is to be able to say whatever you want. Pesach symbolizes our freedom. We could say whatever we want. And the name Passover, until the 1500s, there was no such word. Because until the 1500s, the Bible had never been translated into English. In the 1500s, it was translated into English, and the translator came up with this concept of Passover, and ever since that name has sort of caught on. When do you have the Seder? Big problem, because in reality, the Seder should not start until it's nighttime. Should not start until it's nighttime. And that has become more and more problematic in recent years because the clock now changes earlier, and so the Seder starts later. This year, the Seder is not going to really start until after 8. Again, I know this is problematic with children. I think that the children should be given something to eat earlier. Quite honestly, so that they shouldn't be animals at the Seder until the Seder is 10, 15 minutes old. I mean, why right at the beginning? But the drinking of the wine, the 4 cups, starting with the Kiddush, that really is supposed to happen until it's dark. Because that's the night of Passover. And we have the Haggadah. Where does the Haggadah come from? We already find most of the Haggadah already in the Mishnah, and it precedes even before them. There are some who say you don't have to use Haggadah. Just tell the story. Ask the questions and tell the story. But most everyone today uses a Haggadah of some way, shape, and form. And so we are going to open up the Haggadah, and we are going to start right at the beginning. We make Kiddush. That is on page 5. You can use any kind of wine, but it has become traditional to use red wine because the red also symbolizes the blood that flowed because of Pharaoh's decrees. But you're supposed to use a good wine, an expensive wine. The fact that we can use red wine is rather remarkable because there was a period of time in Jewish history when the rabbis had to say, no, use white wine, because in using red wine in the East European days, we were accused of the blood libel, that we killed a Christian child for the sake of getting the child's blood for the wine at the Pesach Kiddush. So to avoid such charges, for hundreds of years, Jews used white wine. Now, we once again can use red wine, and not only do we use red wine, but traditionally we use a sweet wine, Concord wine. The Concord grape was grown and raised here in America by a man who hated all Mideastern types, including us Jews. And so he must be turning over in his wine vat, knowing that we took his wine and felt it was missing something. Sweetness. So Jews came and poured sugar into the wine. This was done by Mr. Shapiro. And that gave us the wine that we traditionally now use at the Pesach Seder. Okay, you drink your wine. When you finish the drinking, you sit down and you lean to the left and you drink. Everything that you eat at the Seder is supposed to be done leaning. This is a sign of freedom, except when we eat the maror, or the bitter herb, because that is to remind us that we weren't free. After the Kiddush comes karpas. Now, karpas is a very interesting thing, because every step of the way of the karpas, there is a difference of opinion of why we do it. We take a vegetable, we dip it into salt water, and before we do that, we wash our hands. Usually it is only the head of the table who washes his hands, and usually the water is brought to him as a symbol of freedom and royalty. Why do we wash our hands? Because in temple times, when a vegetable came in contact with a liquid, it could become impure. And so we're reminding ourselves of the good old days of the temple on this night of freedom. So we wash our hands and we eat this herb. Why do we eat the herb? This vegetable. What vegetable do we eat? Many different traditions. The tradition of my family is to eat a potato, which in all probability is the wrong tradition. It would seem that we should be eating a green vegetable. People eat parsley. Any other ideas of what you eat? Well, the romaine lettuce becomes problematic because maybe we should be using that for the maror, but in reality, any vegetable would be okay. What am I doing eating a potato? Because in the East European days, the Jews couldn't get the vegetables that you could get today, so they had to settle for the potatoes. So, why do we do this? The explanations range all the way from, there is no reason, just to give the kids something to talk about, or to give us a little something to eat because we've got this long Seder awaiting us.
How come there's no blessing?
How come there is no blessing? Ha ha! Gary asks these wonderful questions. There is a blessing. We make a blessing on this vegetable, and we have in mind that this blessing on this vegetable will also be the blessing to cover the maror when we eat it later in the Seder. We don't make the blessing when washing the hands. That was only for temple times. But for eating this, yes, in fact, we make the blessing. An interesting thought of why we eat karpas is because Jacob's coat of many colors. One of the interpretations, Rashi says that it was kamo karpas, which was fine silk. And that reminds us right at the beginning of the Seder, how did we get into this problem of the Egyptian enslavement? Because Joseph's brothers sold him down the river. If Joseph's brothers hadn't sold him down the river, we never would have had the problems that we have. So before we start the Seder, we remember the root cause of our problems that we still have to this day, that brothers don't treat each other with proper respect. All right, then we break the matzah. Which matzah do we break? The middle one. You should know. Rabbis have spent a lifetime debating which matzah to break, how big to break it, what do you do with the bigger half, what do you do with the smaller half. I've spent my life doing other things, but there were rabbis who debated this. Should we have 2 matzahs or 3? Remember, every Shabbos we have 2. So some said, well, we should have 3 here, because if we're breaking 1, it means we won't have the 2 full loaves like we have for Shabbos. Others insisted, no, keep it at 2. We have the tradition of 3. We break the matzah. We leave the smaller half there. The other half, the larger half, we wrap up and we put away for later on for the afikomen. Moving along, Magid, we tell the story. This is the central part of this experience, telling the story of the enslavement in Egypt. Why do we tell the story? Not simply to remember that it happened, but to remind us of what it felt like being the underdog, being the ones who are harassed, being the ones who are denied their rights. And we who experienced it should be the ones most sensitive to the needs of others who are suffering. And we say it right at the beginning of the Seder. This is the bread of affliction that our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. Whoever is hungry, we know how it's felt. You come on in. That's the purpose of telling the story. Not simply to remember something from the past, but to make us better people because of it. And then come to the Manishtana, the 4 questions. The Manishtana is considered so significant, the asking of the 4 questions is considered so important, that if someone has a Seder by himself, you ask yourself the questions. And there's even a reading of the Rambam which seems to indicate that the father asks the questions of the sons. That's how important the questioning is. Isaac Rabbi, who is a famous Nobel Prize winner in physics, chemistry, biology, something that I didn't do well in school. He used to tell the story that the key to his learning was when he was a little kid, he would come home and his mother always asked him, not, did you do well in school today, or what did you learn in school? She always asked him, did you ask a good question in school? So asking that question is very, very important. And so the child asks the question. And this is a very important part of the Pesach Seder. So please, give your children the right time and opportunity to ask it, to sing it again and again. Not just the youngest one. Let them all have this kind of experience. And today, anybody can have the experience. I just downloaded before on my iPhone, under iManishtana,